April, what have you been doing since Doctor Who? Big question to ask, I know, but it's
busy man.
You got 6 years, have you? Right.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Well, the day after I got up, had breakfast, the day after I finished Doctor Who, and then I got a phone call. I can't remember who that was. It was you, wasn't it? That's not what you want to know, is it?
Well, extremely detailed in general.
I have been doing a lot of theatre, principally. The only television I've done in that time really is a series I did for the Children's Channel, which is a cable satellite channel in the UK, called Cuckoo, which I did 60 odd episodes of. But nobody's seen it because nobody has cable satellite in the UK, so that's pretty good. In which I played an eccentric teacher for the class of children. And I've done one episode of a programme called Casualty, which is I suppose it's a Hill Street Blues version of the hospital, really, isn't it? I've done one of those. And that's it for television for me. All the rest of the time I've been doing theatre. I've done 7 or 8 tours, one after another. One of which went into the West End. I did 3 months in the West End in a play called Run for Your Wife. And I've just finished doing a play called Death and the Maiden, which is the 1992 Olivier Award winner, which is the same as your Tony Awards here. So it's not with me in it, I hasten to add. The good ones left and then they got me. And that is actually on stage at the moment in Wolverhampton with me in it. Tricky that, isn't it? But they have these things called understudies. So in order for me to come over here, they put the poor understudy on. And that play finishes tonight. So I then go back to England Sunday night. Monday I arrive. Tuesday I drive up to the northeast of England, a place called Sunderland, where I am putting on a show as a production company now, 2 other people. At the Sunderland Empire. I'm presenting and I'm trying to write in the few minutes I've got in between things here. I'm doing all the linking stuff for it. That'll be on next Thursday to celebrate the fact that Sunderland has now become a city, which it has. And my company was asked to put the show on. Then the following Monday I start rehearsing for pantomime. Dick Whittington at Weymouth at the Pavilion Theatre, which finished on the 9th of January, and then I'm available for all offers, please. Thank you very much. No, I'm not. 17th of January, we are both filming together with Bill Baggs, Esquire, to finish off the latest of his Stranger. I was about to say trilogy, but it's not just going to be a multi-G. We hope. Lots and lots of them. For those of you who are sitting here who don't know what the Stranger... does everyone know what they are?
Yeah.
Yeah, fine. Well, I won't tell you then.
Now, there are some readers who may not know about The Stranger, perhaps.
Well, the BBC owns a product called Doctor Who, therefore nobody else can make that product. But Mr. Baggs, who is a resourceful man, has written, has produced 2 films already about a character called The Stranger, played by me, who is accompanied through time and space by a lady called Miss Brown, played by Nicola Bryant. And we encounter kind of evil people who happen not to be Daleks or Cybermen, but not far off in temperament anyway. And it's a very neat way of the myth continuing without it being exactly the same myth. Yeah. It's available on video cassette only. It's not broadcast. But you'd like to hear about Nicola now, and what she's been doing in the last 6 years.
I'm so impressed by that.
I don't blame you.
Goodness. You know what a buzz I get just sitting next to you. What did I do? Goodness. When I first...
Well, that's enough about Nicola.
Notice some things never change. The first thing I did when I finished Doctor Who was going to the West End with a play with Patrick McNeil called Killing Jessica. And it was actually originally a television movie which was shown over here called... called something else, but I've forgotten now. Which is very clever of me. Which I can't remember.
Addicted to sex?
No. That's my next release.
She's having trouble with her camera over there. There's one depressed lady on the camera.
Yes, I just broke my neck to get it to film, and now the camera's not working.
Anyway, so I did a West End show, and that went on for about 6 months at the Savoy, which later burnt down, which had nothing to do with me. And then I went and did a season at Chester, so I got to play a variety of roles, doing a sort of come-on Jeeves upper crust character. I got to play Honey in Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, and Olivia in Twelfth Night, and a whole bunch of things. And then I went to do Blackadder, did the Christmas special. And then I went into the West End again, and I played the lead in a play called Strive, which caused a lot of trouble. Because it was a very political play about the Falklands, in which there were 4 characters all stating their different opinions about the war, and none of them really budged on their opinion. And the play didn't fall on any particular side, it just very clearly stated 4 different opinions. So depending upon the politics of your audience every night, you're either very popular or into a lot of trouble. So it got quite dangerous leaving the stage door regularly doing that show. And then I've done lots and lots of other theatre, and the most recent of which was a sort of 9-month tour of The Great Gatsby, playing Daisy Buchanan. And that was the first time that play had ever been done in England.
How did you get the part in Blackadder? It was rather a strange part.
It was, yeah. It was a
rather
strange
squeaky
audition.
voiced character.
At the time I auditioned for Blackadder, I was playing Honey in Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, and Honey has a particularly odd laugh. And, you know, she just laughs hysterically for like one act and cries hysterically for the next. And when I went to the audition, Ben Elton wasn't there, but he'd left a message with Richard Curtis, the producer, that he wanted someone who was able to do some kind of funny laugh, and he hadn't decided yet what the character was going to be about, but the character was going to be obviously very British, upper crust, OTT, and quite eccentric, and most of it was improvised during rehearsal, it wasn't just plain scripted. So at the time I just said, well, at the moment I'm playing Honey, and that's her laugh, and I gave them Honey's laugh. They laughed about that, I thought that was great.
What was it like?
I can't remember that.
I want to hear the laugh.
No, you can't.
We want to hear the laugh. People need to know these things.
No, this is for the written page.
No, it's not. That's the written page, the length of the front.
So I can't remember particularly what I did for Honey. I could research it in my own mind and come back with it tomorrow, but I can't do it now. And then when we got to do Blackadder, one rehearsal, Ben Elton came in and he said, I've decided that this should be something like a machine gun that you can't switch off. You just sort of like press the button and it starts. You know, and he wanted something, you know, really that would grate on everybody's nerves. So I sort of went off to the ladies' loo and kept coming back with different laughs. And how's this one? No. How's that one? Oh, that's pretty disgusting. Yeah, no, try another one. And eventually I sort of came back with this sort of high-pitched soprano machine gun attack sound, which he thought was right for the character, and started writing in bits about the ornaments falling off the shelves and putting earmuffs on and all that. But a lot of that is improvised as you sort of go through the rehearsal, though it's a very short rehearsal period. We just kept sort of changing things as we went along.
Nicola's very fond of improvisation, aren't you?
No,
Doing stuff with
no, I
it.
know. I don't know what I make myself in for. Apparently I'm going to be doing some improvisation tonight.
Both of you have done television and theater, and you've done mostly theater since you left Doctor Who. Is that partly because you're typecast or because you enjoy theater?
It's entirely because I'm typecast, in the sense that, not because... Typecasting isn't anything to do with audiences, really. Audiences, I find, will accept anybody in anything. They quite like seeing people they've seen in other things, but what happens is producers and directors don't want their new product to be prejudiced by preconceptions from an audience about the person who's playing that part. So if you've played something that's very high profile on television, it tends to be some time before you get any other television. And particularly if you're played a very particular character, like the Doctor in Doctor Who. And my Doctor was a kind of very specific performance, and it wasn't kind of one that you would fail to notice, I suppose. So the end result has been that I don't get offered that much television. And also, unless you're offered a long contract in something in television, it tends to be only a couple of weeks' work, doing one television programme. Whereas the theatre I've been offered is 6 months' work. And as I have a young family to support, I have to go with that. That's the reason. If you ask me which I prefer, I much prefer television. I know that's not what actors usually say. Actors say, I like to get the real live buzz from the an audience. I like to get the real life buzz of going home at night afterwards and seeing my family. And I enjoy working in a television studio. I like working on a bit and getting it right, or as right as you can, and moving on to the next bit.
Yeah, I mean, I got a lot of offers for screaming American teenagers when I left Doctor Who. It's like every part that's got a screaming American teenager landed on my doormat. And as much as there is a lot of very, very good American work in England that I like to do, I want to do a variety of things. And I was very lucky to get Blackadder, but it's the same thing. I mean, a lot of casting directors won't see me because they think I'm American all the time. And then it works the other way as well. They go, oh, it's an American part. No, we've actually found out she's English. No, we don't want her. So you can get caught between that sort of problem and the fact that Doctor Who is a rather strange show in a way, that in that they can't they sort of think it's children's show, and yet it's actually under drama, and it's very difficult if you've made yourself a particularly large size, as we say, character. I was agreeing with your statement. That it can be difficult to break that image, because casting directors most of the time won't take the trouble to meet you and discover that you are actually a sort of neutral base, but hopefully you can play a great many things. And as Colin said, it's not the audiences. Audiences want to see you do a great many things, and it's not so much so in America. If you have a successful series over here, you very much move on to do something else because people want to see you. You say, oh, this is a successful person. People enjoy watching this person. Let's put them in something else. Whereas it's, oh my goodness, we've seen them before. And it's a different attitude in England. But I definitely love to do a lot more television, though I do love doing theatre as well. I like actually doing something that is different each job. That would be my ideal. Not just the character, but the medium as well.
That hasn't caused any regrets with either of you of doing the part in Doctor Who, has it?
No. I think that's
No, I wouldn't be asked to be doing all the plays I am doing if I hadn't done Doctor Who. I mean, it's a two-edged sword. On the one hand, it's slowed down my rate of... Because I used to, in terms of Doctor Who, I was doing all sorts of television all the time. But as soon as you become identified with something, then you're stuck for a while until a whole new breed of directors come who haven't heard of you. And I'm moving into that phase now. And all the television directors I know and have worked with have all retired. So there's a whole new breed, and I'm going to go along as a kind of unknown face quite soon, which will be quite useful.
Tell us about John Nathan Turner, because a lot of these, there's like right-wing extremist Doctor Who fanzines that blame him for every problem in Doctor Who. And give me your opinion.
Well, I have extremely strong opinions about that. I mean, I'm feeling very, very sympathetic towards John, because what he has done for the programme is 10 times more than anybody else has ever done. And there is a very tiny little coterie of megalomaniacs who are fans who are frustrated because they've never been the producer of the programme, mainly in Britain. I mean, I don't know if there are any over here, I don't know any. But there are 2 or 3 that I could name, but won't, in the UK, who have made it their lifetime job to do everything they can to sabotage John Nathan Turner. And I think it's ungrateful, miserable, pettifogging, ghastly behaviour. And I think they're worms that ought to be trodden into the ground. Don't beat about Bush, Colin. Tell them what you really think.
Yes.
No, I just think it's awful, because John produced Peri for a long time. He is responsible for it being over in this country as successfully as it is. He came over here and marketed it. He always cared about the fans. He always made sure that people like myself and Nicola came to conventions when our first inclinations were, what's all that about? I'm not too sure about that. He persuaded people like Pat Troughton, who never wanted to have any further contact with the programme, and then found out that he loved it. And it was all John. And John has kept the programme on the air in Britain. I mean, he was the only person at the BBC fighting for it. Witness the fact that now he's been ousted, as it were. There's nobody in the BBC who's waving the flag. And those same people are still campaigning to get rid of the little bit that John is doing. I mean, he's been in charge of releasing on the videos. And they've orchestrated a kind of hate campaign against him for his choice of videos now. And I just think it's just so stupid, and it's all jealousy. It's simply jealousy on the Swedish parts, and I think the right-minded fan, I mean, it's like all vocal minorities. They can swamp the majority, which covers a wide spectrum of opinions. I mean, I'm not saying that everyone approves wholeheartedly of everything that John's ever done. Of course, John's made mistakes, I've made mistakes, you've made mistakes, everyone's made mistakes. But, I mean, they've coined phrases like pantomime. Doctor Who's become a pantomime, because one article said that once. I don't see any men dressed up as women. That's what pantomime's about. I don't see terrible jokes apart from mine, and that was my choice, not John's. I put them in. Well, I could go on for half an hour about how unfair I think it all is. And John is a friend, and it is actually, for a while he shrugged it off, but now it's beginning to get to him. And I think if people want to make someone unhappy, then there's something wrong with them. And I think the rest of us should make sure that that's not allowed to continue.
Do you feel that...
I rest my case.
They seem to be unable to divorce personal opinions about the man from perhaps disagreements about certain decisions made as producer, which
Yes.
everyone does.
And also, I mean, he's set himself up by being involved with the programme for 10 years. There's an awful lot of stuff there to criticise or to praise. Other producers, came in for 3 years, didn't give a hoot about the programme basically, and popped out again. And they're kind of safe because they haven't done anything controversial. They just he tried to do new things.
You took all the risks. And
He took the risks. Yeah.
Do you feel it was also, let's say, the politics of television as well as jealousy that Dr. Who's been put through lately? Like,
I don't think that there is any conscious feeling about it, really. I think that they're irritated by, the vocal minority. I think they find the fact that they get these irritating letters from fans all the time at the BBC makes them less likely to bring it back rather than more likely.
how do you feel about some of the fans who are planning to sue BBC because they're dragging their feet about putting the show back on the air?
You can't. It's
It's
ridiculous.
nonsense, you can't.
Yeah.
You can't sue an author because he's not writing a book you like, can you? And neither can you sue the BBC for not producing programmes you want. It's a bizarre nonsense.
It's way too large to attack. It's way too large an organisation.
Well, that's not the reason, actually. The BBC, I once tried to persuade the BBC to sue a company over here that were producing photographs and posters which were not authorised, with pictures of myself and Nicola on. And the BBC were timid about doing that because it's all legal costs, very expensive in America, and they wouldn't do it. So that's not the reason. I mean, it's just simply a matter of law. And there's no legal basis on which you can sue a broadcast company for not making a programme you like.
Otherwise we'd all sue them for Eldorado, wouldn't we?
Yeah.
It is a humorous thought.
Well, John Jeremy said yesterday that the lawsuit is basically falling apart. The proposed lawsuit that they were trying to instigate.
They didn't even raise enough money to hire a lawyer, so...
Do you think the public TV stations and the Sci-Fi Channel, who's just picked up Doctor Who, could have any influence on that, saying that overseas sales are really strong in America, we have PBS stations picking it up again, we have a cable station picking it up again?
Sorry,
no.
no.
Have any effect?
I once had dinner with a nice man called Ray Craft, who used to be, he's last no longer with us, who was the president of Lionheart Films at the time. This was about 6-7 years ago. I mean, a very pleasant man. At the end of the day, he said, Colin, I won't attempt an American accent. Colin, when you go back to England, could you go and see Michael Grade and tell him we really need more product? At the moment you're making, I think at that time it was 26 episodes a year. We really need at least 52. And he was halfway through this, and I said to him, hang on a sec. The first thing is I have no access to Michael Grade whatsoever. I mean, a lead actor in an American TV series would probably know the guy who's in charge of the TV station that was making the programme. That doesn't work in England. Actors are employees like anybody else. I have no say whatsoever in the decisions made by the top brass of the BBC. And if I meet them, it was only for a nod at a cocktail party or something, and they probably have got a clue who I am.
Same thing holds true here.
Oh, I'm not sure.
No, that's not true in America.
No, that's not what Blackadder tells me.
Rule Hollywood.
It's both true and false.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that there is, I mean, between Cagney and Lacey and the people who make the programme, there is contact.
Well, that was fans that wrote in, and that's
No,
what
but
changed it.
no, but what I mean is that the head of the TV station, and besides they're paid about 20 times more than we get paid. If you're paying people that kind of money, you want to know what their opinion is. If you're paying someone peanuts, you don't care. And we are on comparative peanuts. And if I'd been doing Doctor Who in America, well,
You'd be a millionaire.
I'll be a richer person than I am now, I can tell you that. Boy. There is, I mean, if you bear in mind that this is an organisation which annually has received more in income from Doctor Who than it costs to make that year's programmes. It's got 28 years of product to sell. Any other organisation would have a vested interest in keeping that product going, wouldn't they? But because the income from the sales of the programme don't go back into the department that make the programmes, it just goes into the BBC coffers to spread thinly over the whole organisation. The programme making arm of the BBC, the series and sales departments, has no incentive whatsoever to make more of it. Now, you've also got producers there who have projects they want to get financing for. They say, look, I've got this book I want to adapt. Now, if there's 10 of them coming saying, I want to make this programme, I want to make this programme, and there's no one coming saying, I want to make Doctor Who, then Doctor Who has got to be fought for by somebody, which is what John Nathan Turner did for a long time. And there ain't no one there batting for it until Powell goes at the end of next year. He's announced his intention to depart. Then I think it's extremely likely that there's going to be any further product. It's my opinion.
Do you feel that your long-term plan of development of the Doctor character to slowly bring him to be a more likable character may have been a mistake and you would want to change that? And also, do you feel that during your time off the show when you were vocal against the fact of being taken off, that hurt you in the future, that you were eventually ousted from the show because of it?
To deal with the second point first, I wasn't actually that vocal. It's one of those things that's been perpetuated by fan magazines and newspapers that Colin Baker spoke out. And maybe I should have done, but I didn't actually. I was quite careful not to criticise anybody for the very simple reason that I didn't want to be hampered by the baggage of being a critic of the powers that be. I accepted it and got quietly on with my career. So I don't think that's a reason. I think everything's much more casual than that. I don't think any personal attitude to me caused any decisions of any kind. I think I was a tiny pawn. I think Michael Grade's hardly aware of my existence, really. And the first part of your question, what was that about?
It was about the development of your character.
Oh, yeah. No, I wouldn't change that at all. If you give away everything on page 1, you've got nothing to write for the next 99 pages. And if you envisage you've got a potential long run to go, you want to hold some things back. And I thought it was quite exciting and quite interesting to have a character who was a little inaccessible, a little enigmatic, a little unlikable, apparently. I don't know if you have this experience in your lives, and I certainly do in mine. The people who are my best friends now are the ones I didn't actually like very much when I first met them. And I can think of one or two very close friends who I actively loathed when I first met them.
We didn't stand each other.
We couldn't stand each other,
We
didn't
don't
we?
like each other much now.
And I always remember that there's a book called Pride and Prejudice, which you may or may not have read, and there's a character in that called Darcy, who at the end of the book turns out to be the hero. But for the first 2/3, everyone thinks he's a deeply unpleasant, selfish swine, because he doesn't go around wearing his virtues on his sleeve. And I think those characters are just more interesting, and I wanted to play the Doctor that way.
Well, I personally, and I think a lot of other people probably in this room found it pretty interesting. We enjoyed it, and I didn't think it was an unnatural development of the character to become somewhat bored and tiresome of, just sort of not having this sort of feeling of the fact that to back off and that, well, they may be evil, but they have their good in them too. I mean, sometimes you become frustrated in the fact that, well, they're in the way, they are my enemies, and that maybe, I should do them in. And I mean, the idea of your Doctor seemed to be a little bit more kind of, at times, somewhat personally violent at times, and I didn't really find that as being a problem, but I know that there was a lot of criticism in many other fan presses and articles stating the fact that your Doctor was at times too violent, and I almost see it as a natural progression. I mean, you can only deal with so much in your 900-year light of dealing with these alien races depressing everybody. I thought it was a natural progression. I didn't really.
And it opens up debate as well, doesn't it? I mean, if the character was just slightly different all the time, but basically the same, if you have 12 versions of yourself, as we've discovered with the Balliard, who is a potential interface between two aspects of the Doctor, if you like, there's going to be all sorts of qualities there. Makes it more interesting, I think.
Isn't it true that every new Doctor has a period where they have to be accepted by the fans? Even,
Oh, yeah.
Every new Doctor has to go through that?
Yeah. I mean, I suppose the hardest job ever was for poor old Peter after 7 years of Tom. And Tom being such a strong and particular Doctor, and that had such a huge following. I mean, every interview I ever get with kind of non-fan magazines, i.e., the local newspaper in a town, says, "Where's your scarf?" Now, the only Doctor ever to wear a scarf was Tom. But I mean, the scarf is so associated with a lot of people's idea of what Doctor Who's about. So Peter, I mean, had a tough job there actually, which is why he chose to play totally opposite, kind of very neutral, preppy sort of image. Yeah, you have to overcome, in that case, almost a generation of children who watch the programme. I'm picking on children because they're the ones who start watching something for the first time. So a young child will have seen as his Doctor only Doctor Who, only Tom Baker for 5 or 6 years, and suddenly they've got to change. Nobody likes change. Well, most people don't
The
like
problem
change.
over here too was like when they premiered the show, both on commercial and public TV, they always started off with Tom Baker. They didn't start from the beginning on up to give us an idea of what the show was all about.
Because I suppose they thought they couldn't start with black and white. You can't start showing a program in black and white. They had 7 years of Tom Baker to show to really get people hooked. It's a sensible way of starting it.
Speaking of...
While we're on the historical note of Doctor Who, do you know anything about the last season, either of you? Do you know anything about the last season of Doctor Who, particularly the sort of unknown story of Penacasada? The last season of...
The season that was not made in favor of Trial of the Time Lord.
All the stories that would, like, your character was supposedly to meet the Ice Warriors with...
All I know was that I read The Nightmare Fair and thought it was a darn good story, and was disappointed not to make it. I knew that there was an Autons in Singapore story, and that's all I know about it.
Well, it's, they've been novelized, I think.
Yeah, but not one of them.
Oh, one of them, yeah.
Not Penacasada.
And how often?
Only Nightmare Fair was
I guess it's
novelized.
Yeah, I think it was the only one that got as far as a full script.
Others were just drafts and ideas.
Yeah.
So they didn't do much. That's disappointing.
Have you ever had a chance to read any of those books, or?
I read the Nightmare Fair novelisation because they asked me to review it, and I enjoyed it. I remember being quite excited when I read the script for it and was looking forward to doing it. Some few weeks afterwards. There we are.
People have said, or there have been comments that one of the problems with Trial of the Time Lord is that there were so many bits and pieces cut together in order to have this trial umbrella theme that it was confusing for the actors to know what was going on at various points in the story. Was that true?
No, I mean, it's not confusing for the actors because we film in bits anyway. I mean, one day we're filming a sequence where you go into the TARDIS, and the next day you're shooting a sequence that relates to a scene that you shot 2 weeks earlier anyway. As actors, you're always shooting in bits, and it's up to you to keep a track of the story. I think the only perhaps problem of making it bitty was that as a program you would just get into a drama sequence and something that was happening, and so then you were thrown back out again, back into the trial. And whether or not that was necessarily the best tack to be taking, I don't know, but it definitely wasn't confusing for the actors any more than any other episode.
I was very confused by it. I hate to be telling a different story, but I had a slightly different problem, particularly in Mind Warp, whether, I don't have to go into great details about the story, but there was a point where I said to Eric Saywood,
We were in
who
different
was
positions.
our script editor, I said, when I'm tying Peri up onto this rock and hurling abuse at her and torturing her and threatening to betray her, am I doing it for some subtle motive of my own because I think I'm being watched or something like that? B, am I doing it because I've been affected by the mind probe, therefore I'm a bit kind of dippy? C, is the Matrix lying? Did this actually happen or not? Those are the three alternatives as I saw it. He said, oh, I don't know, you better ask Philip Martin. So I got in touch with Philip Martin and asked Philip Martin, who'd written the script, and I gave him those three alternatives. He said, well, I don't know, he said Eric wrote the trial stuff, and all the Matrix stuff was added on afterwards. You better ask him. I said, well, he told me to ask you. So I went back again and spoke to John Nathan Turner and Eric. And John said, well, Eric, which is it? And he said, oh, whichever you like. This is the level of involvement at that time. I mean, Mr. Saywood isn't exactly my favourite person for a variety of reasons. He was going through his own problems with John Nathan Turner at that time. They were disagreeing about all sorts of things. I felt that was all very sloppily handled. It was cobbled together a bit. The stories had been written independently, and then the umbrella theme of the trial was put on top of it. And at some point, somebody must have known what was going on there. And I chose to believe, the only way I could play it was to play it that it was absolutely for the truth, and that it was the Matrix line, so that when I was doing the scenes, it was genuine. I really was betraying Peri, killing her, because it never happened, therefore I could do it. It was a figment of the Balliards tampering with the Matrix. And it was quite difficult, and you expect people who write things to know why they're writing them. It's not always the case.
It's a bit actually like suddenly being revealed later that I ended up being married to Yukanos.
Yeah, that was really cheap.
When we were never playing that. And you think, well, I might have played a couple of scenes slightly differently if that's the way things were going. And it was not the original way that script was written. It was not the way that either of us were playing it.
Well, you sort of can tell that it's just tacked on the end, really.
It was to deal with the fact that
that was my fault.
Very upset.
It was my fault again, because I said at the end, I said, no mention is made of whether what happened to Peri is true or false. If the Matrix has been lying, we need to tie up the end. And they said, well, what do you want? I said, well, I want to know, what was your intention? He said, well, do you think she should survive? They asked me. And I said, well, I'd like Peri to survive, because I like her, then she can come back, because I knew Bonnie was going to be around. No, that's not true.
Oh, the tape has stopped.
Oh, good.
One of the things you said the other night was that the BBC probably won't bring back Doctor Who, but they'll probably bring back something else to replace it. How would you feel if that something else could be perhaps The Stranger? And would both of you consider coming back to do it?
I think there would be absolutely no point in the BBC bringing back The Stranger, because if they're going to do that, they might as well bring back Doctor Who.
It's not necessarily Doctor Who.
No, it's not. But whatever fiction we all put together for the purposes of avoiding litigation, nonetheless, the similarities are so close that they might as well use the product they've got, and also then they can tap into all the mythology that goes with it. The 30 years of it. I wasn't the one who said they'd bring back something similar. I think they'll either bring back Doctor Who, or they'll bring back something totally different, or they'll start something totally different.
It was like the attempt at Space Cops, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Star Trek.
Every now and then the BBC have dabbled in sci-fi. It was called Moonbase years ago, which I've never seen shown at any conventions. They did 2 or 3 series of it.
It was destroyed, that's why.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, the BBC wiped it all.
Like they did with the early episodes of Doctor Who?
Yes, exactly.
Oh.
They discovered they can erase tapes.
This is how we wipe it.
Speaking of development of the Doctor, how did you get the part in The Ultimate Adventure, and did you feel that redressed some way that you really wanted to play the Doctor if it had gone on as a series? If you had gone on in the series?
Well, I got the part because when they decided to do the piece, they approached all the doctors, basically, kind of blanket, would you be interested in doing a stage show? And I think at that time 2 of them said yes. That was Pertwee and myself said yes, we would be interested. And because Terence Dix, who wrote it, had worked with Pertwee extensively, he was keener to write it for Pertwee. So that they went down the Pertwee path, as it were. But just as it was beginning, John said that 3 months was his maximum, and they wanted to get 6 months out of it. So they asked me if I'd do the second half of the tour. So I said yes, I would. And then I met up with Terence Dix, who asked me what alterations I would like to make to the script. And it struck me there's no point in making any at all, really. If he could trust me to change the few lines here and there that were hyper-pert, as it were. Things like reversing polarities and neutron flows. But even then I just changed that to reverse the linearity of the proton flow or something, as a kind of little homage. But the only change I made was I had all the lines that Pertwee had written all over the set rubbed out, because I could remember them. Sorry, John. And developed a different relationship with Zog. I think John felt that Zog was, for those of you who don't know, Zog was his little furry alien who was an extra companion. And Zog majored in Cutesville, you see. I mean, it was a female actually, but this little tiny furry thing that was extremely cute. And I think John thought it was distracting from his charm as the Doctor, so he tended to ignore it when it was capering about. And I thought there were endless possibilities for humour with this little creature, so we built up a rather good relationship. Enjoyed that.
For Nicola, how did you, as far as in the series as Peri, you had a lot of screaming to do. Now, how did you feel about Miss Brown? Was she more the character that you would have liked portrayed in Doctor Who?
When I, to take it sort of right back to the, when I first auditioned for Peri, the original description was a tall, long, blonde, leggy Californian. So yeah, I would play that. So, but the character wasn't particularly well formed, and as the auditions went on over a period of 2 or 3 months, I finally got to read the first draft of Planet of Fire. And I based my whole sort of background of Peri on that one story, which I thought she was obviously an intelligent young girl, had intelligent parents, extremely unhappy family background, young, naive, I should imagine, from a rather sort of sheltered upbringing, but a spunky little kid. So I thought there was a good chance of taking this somewhere, because A, it was sort of like the beginning of her growth period, mentally, that she could like team up with someone like the Doctor would be a wonderful new opening experience to her. And if she starts out as a courageous, plucky kid, well then she's obviously going to expand from that. And I like the fact that in the very first story she was like kicking the master and giving him what for, and I thought, oh yeah, this is good. This is about what we need. And I expected the character to develop from that point onwards. I think Caves was perfectly acceptable because she was sick. So I was playing ill for most of that episode, and I liked the sort of strong Beauty and the Beast sort of aspect that was in that, and I thought it was well filmed by Graham. But I think by the time I got into my second season, they just so harped on about the bickering between the two of us and the sort of language thing, and then stories popped up like Time Lash, and they seemed to completely forget where the original character had come from. I was much, much happier with Trial, because at least they then accepted that time had passed and the relationship had to change, because the way that the Doctor and Peri were going on, they would have killed each other, or she'd have just said, oh, for God's sake, let me out here, you know, or he'd have said, get out, you know. I mean, it would have ended, because there was no reason for the two of them to stay together. There has to be some kind of amicable reason for being together, and somehow that seemed to get lost somewhere in the middle of the second season as well. So I was much happier with Trial, but I would have taken it in a different direction if I had been completely in the driving seat of where Peri would have gone.
And the Bill Baggs stories, the character in that, Miss Brown?
Is perhaps a little nearer to what I would do, definitely. Especially in the second story. I mean, she's more intelligent, and it's not a case of she's actually dealing with situations herself and using the doctor, I think, in the right capacity in the things that he has more experience in, going to help, for him to help in situations that are just beyond her or any other human being's capacity.
More involved.
Yeah,
Certainly
exactly.
more equal.
And the story that we're filming at the moment, I think, is incredibly interesting, and I cannot reveal why it's incredibly interesting, because it would kind of spoil the whole story.
relationship thing.
But the relationship is very interesting in the story, because it really gives us a chance to form something new.
Yes.
Mincer changed to meat grinder. I remember that was a long saga. That took me 3 weeks. In that, I would say, I'm sorry, but you don't say this in the States. You don't say, I feel like I've been through the mincer, doctor. No, it's meat grinder. I mean, they were saying, but nobody in England will know what the meat grinder is. I said, well, then cut the line, say something else. But use the proper word, yeah. And it was like the whole thing about, can I please say cop? No, you must say policeman. But I'm American. No, say policeman. All of that stuff that I was supposed to have control over changing was not as strong as I had been led to believe when I began. And then there were things like we would say, I'm sorry, we can't say this because 4 stories ago we established that I never knew this. So when he says to me, Peri, shut the TARDIS door, I can't do it if I've never established that I know where it is, or whatever the particular situation was. And most of the time those were listened to, but they were just minuscule things. If we wanted
almost
any real
being irritating.
yes, how annoying of you to remember that. How annoying of you to know that your character shouldn't know that. It would have been a lot simpler if it had just been made, and at least that's what they thought at the time. Because it's such a long process to go back. It comes up in the rehearsal room. Normally we would say to each other first, well, how come I'm saying that? And we'd agree on it, because it did help to be a duo. And we would mention it to the director, who would be standing next to the personal assistant, who would probably then rush off and get on the phone, who would ring John Nathan Turner and Eric, who would then ring the writer. And by the time it got to the writer, the reason for why you probably wanted to change it had
Been through 3 or 4
it's Chinese
people.
whispers. And sort of like probably the whole...
So they'd be irritated, thinking you were being picky about something that they didn't understand.
Yeah.
You were never allowed to ring the writer direct. Oh, he was just a pain in the neck, really.
Yeah, ridiculous long chain. And it finally got back to you, and the answer was usually no. And then you'd go, well, what am I supposed to do then? And it would just go back and forth. So
And it ends up with
ridiculous.
just being the actors being irritating.
Yeah.
I remember once, at the beginning of the trial, being whipped into that court by that beat thing, whatever it was, and finding myself on trial. And I said to Eric Sayward, I said, the last time that we met the Time Lord, the doctor was the president of the Gallifrey, wasn't he? And he said, was he? I said, yes, I remember Peter being made president after, it was 5 doctors, was it?
Yeah.
He said, so? I said, well, all he has to say is I'm the president of Gallifrey, sod off, all of you. And so he said, well, we'll put a line in to make you happy. So he put a line in saying, I'm the president, no you're not, you've been deposed, and that was the end of that. But at least they did take on board the fact, but it shouldn't be an actor who, I only happened by chance, I knew very little about the history of the programme. There should have been more kind of thought going into it, I thought. The only lines I ever, I didn't often get lines changed, but I did put lines in. Most of those puns, I'm afraid, were mine, the Perrier and things like that. It was agreed that my doctor would be allowed to make awful puns, so if I thought of them and they were accepted by the author, who couldn't give a hoot. And lines like calling, my favourite one was when I got to call Paul Darrow a microcephalic apostate. That was one of mine as well. And he didn't know what it meant, so that was all right.
Just when you were about to give your name in the first episode of Trial, you're just about, I should write a doctorate about that, and Peri interrupts you just before you say your name.
That's right.
Yeah.
That was mine as well.
The only thing I did get put in was something that came up at the BBC canteen at one point, and we were talking about the budget for the show and something like that, and John Nathan Turner said that one of the things they got a lot of letters about was the fact that it was very obvious that we built 2 corridors and that we were seen in the same corridors going back and forth, or 2 sewers, or 2 this. And I said, well, why don't you just stick a line in about it? And he said, well, like what? And I said, well, if every time you go somewhere the companion says, God, doctor, all these halls look the same to me, you know, all these swimming pools, all these tunnels, all these sewers. If somewhere, and it's in every episode, you just sort of like, I think sort of, it'll be just sort of like coming into a scene, you hear Peri going, God, all these so look the same to me. And then that way, every time, you know, somebody sort of says, well, all the corridors are the same. Well, you're absolutely right, they did. It was part of the story. That's why they got lost. It was the only thing I think I ever sort of really got to put in, which is my own sort of personal gag.
So you also got very little input into your costumes, I gather, as well.
No, Nicola chose hers.
Yeah, I did.
That was a major
Madonna
bugbear.
copied me years later, but you know. But, yeah, what a way to get pneumonia. I was very happy in my first costume, actually. It was very sensible. Somebody's through? Because I actually got to wear flat, comfortable espadrilles, and I was in cotton clothing and all of that. And it was just the fact that the press made such a big to-do about, you know, Doctor Who girl in a bikini, blah, 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 and all this great big centre spread in the Daily Star. And I think John Nathan Turner suddenly thought, because of the ratings, suddenly shut up. Oh, I've gotten onto something good here, we'll leave her in a bikini for the rest of the season. And I didn't get dressed again, really, for the Caves of Androzani, which was utterly ludicrous, because though we were filming in Lanzarote in October, which was like mid-late 70s, upper 70s, and then in November we're feeling the sort of, we're filming the next series, and I've got a slight sort of little bit of cotton they've thrown in extra under the shirt, and we're talking it's, I don't know, -2 or 3. Peter's in like 2 layers of thermals and so he's dying. I caught pneumonia and I got frostbite. And the cameraman frequently said, "Would you slap that girl? She's gone blue." And I was going, "I'm so sorry, you know." And it was horrendous and ridiculous. And I wasn't happy running around in shorts and leotards because that was also a total. It had nothing to do with the character that I started out with. I mean, I imagined sneakers and jeans and sweatshirts, t-shirts, you know.
Sophie seems to have done pretty well, and she wears quite a bit of clothing as it is. So
Yeah.
I think, like
Yeah.
the bomber jacket, for one, is very recognizable. That would have been pretty common
Yeah.
before.
Well, I think also that we went through a sudden fashion change as well. Suddenly we went in for this much more sort of masculine dressing for women. I mean, and although I'm wearing myself now shorts and all of that, but you wear thick tights and you wear flat shoes, and a whole change of fashion actually happens. I think it was much easier to choose another young person and let them make a fashion statement as well. Whereas I think mine just started out as practical clothing, which didn't get changed for the fact that it was then totally impractical for the rest of my time. If the press had just ignored it, I think I would have gone into jeans and sweatshirts. When I auditioned, I wore the kind of clothing that I thought Peri would wear, and I always had baggy shirts on and sweatshirts and all that kind of stuff, which leads on to a very funny story, which I'll tell very briefly, which is like I went for all my auditions wearing things like this, and when I got to do the press release, John Nathan Turner said to me, "Wear something very clingy and short," and all that. I didn't have anything. I said, "Well, I don't have anything like that." And he said, "Well, don't you have anything that clings to you?" I said, "Well, I've got a leotard." He said, "Well, wear that then." He said, "Well, do you have anything short?" And I didn't have any short skirts or anything like that. I said, "Well, I've got a pair of shorts. It's the only short thing I have." "Right, well, wear those two." So I brought those, which doesn't hold, you know, water to the story. Well, that's what she chose to wear on the first day. It was the only thing I had. So I wore that for the press release, and John very kindly handed me this bag just as I went to get changed, and I said, "What's this?" He said, "Well, it's just in case you want to pop some of this in your bra." And it was cotton wool. He brought me a whole ton of cotton wool to pad my bra out because he thought there was nothing there, which was rather funny actually when I put the leotard on. Gave him a surprise, but it wasn't.
You can take the cotton wool out now, Nicola.
Can I?
We all
Thank
know.
you, sweetheart. You're very
That's
sweet.
all right.
Well, I thought I'd reveal it here that, you know, it is actually only cotton wool that I've been wearing.
But to sell it, warm cotton wool.
But it was the costume was totally impractical, and it wasn't right for the character, and it was just ridiculous, and I wasn't happy with it, and I was cold most of the time.
the costumes did improve for the trial season, though. I think your costumes were much more fashionable.
I got to grow my hair back and all of that too. But I wanted to just buy things because I wanted to just take things off the peg. They always had to be designed, which sort of just gives that slightly costumey feel all the time, which I thought was very wrong for a character, that was contemporary. And I just wanted to be able to go out and buy clothes. I just thought that would be much more realistic. But the only reason I got the trousers was because of a big sort of fight sequence we had in Time Lapse when I first got to wear them. I think it was Time Lapse, we filmed that before. And I was on the studio floor, and they were expecting me to be in costume, and I was in the trousers and the suede jacket thing. And a voice came down from above saying, "Well, Nicola, please get into her costume because we're going to start filming soon." And I said, "Well, this is my costume." And John came down and he wasn't very happy because I was in trousers. And I was told, "Right, that's it. You can't have a second costume for the next story then." And I went, "That's fine." And I was told I could just have a coat, and that was what all the budget would allow me, because they were furious that I'd done that. And it's because I was actually asked by the costume designer for the first time, "What would you like to wear?" And I went, "Well, considering the next story's outside, I'd like a coat for the next one, and I'd like trousers and boots for this one." He went, "Yeah, sure." So he designed it, and I think nobody had any problems with that particular costume. That was because I'd been able to do that. It enabled the next season to be allowed to be filmed with trousers.
I'm sorry, we've got about a minute and a half left.
How about your costume, Colin?
I was asked what I would like to wear, and I kept I went and got all sorts of books out of the library on costume, and none of them seemed right. And so I said I'd like something kind of black, a bit austere, kind of ruffled sleeves and a kind of long black coat and black trousers. And I said, "Well, that's the master, really." Right. So then John said, "I think you should be really tasteless." I said, "That's an idea that appealed to me. I thought it was quite good." Then they kept coming up with these designs. He asked designers to design tasteless clothes. You see, it's quite tricky, that. If you're a designer, you're used to doing things which you consider to be tasteful. So poor Pat Godfrey kept coming back with design after design, and in the end she kind of threw together this collection of clashing materials, and that was what was chosen. I never cared for it that much, but I was on the inside looking out, so it wasn't my problem, it was yours. It was warm for filming, at least. Then it's the time Nicola's benefiting from that. We'd be out in the freezing snow, and because I'm a gentleman, I'd take my coat off and wrap it around Nicola. What a saint. I gather that this is either I've got to cut my throat or it's finishing time. I'm not sure what.
I would prefer the latter rather than